Hey pilots, Craig Gamma with Paraglider Service USA. Today we're going to go over on how we trim tune paragliders. So let's get with it here. Let me give you an example here. Okay, there's a line layout. Every glider has different ways of grouping lines, so you can't use this one example as for all gliders. But what is common with gliders is we have an A row, B row, C row, and some have D and E rows. E rows for tandems and D rows for some of your lower class gliders, like ENA gliders. But a lot of them are steering away from that, and I'll just go in A, B, and C. But for the most part, each row, like here's the A row near the leading edge, and the B row's right below it, and then the C row, and then the D row, and of course the trailing edge will have the brake lines here. And so they did the labeling here. They kind of split it onto each half so that they can see the labeling clearly. But this B row designations of these, each line at the canopy would be right here below the A row. And it's the same on both halves, of course. So I just wanted to show you that each side has basically, for the most part, each row in each half of the glider has 3 main lines per row. So the A row here will have 3 main lines at the riser. Okay, so at the riser link for the A row, we'll have 3 main lines, and sometimes they'll split it up and have the last outside line group will be a split A, that'll be just for the big ears. And some of them have them combined, but in any case, there's 3 main lines for the A row, 3 main lines for the B row, 3 main lines for the C row, and the outside 4th line group is the stabilos, and that could maybe on the C row and it may be on the B row, but in any case, the 4th line group is the stabilos. And so here's the center line of the glider, the right half and the left half, and you'll have the inner line group, which is line group 1, whether it's the A row, B row, or C row. This is all line group 1, and over here in the center of this half of this wing will be line group 2, and the outside line group is line group 3, and the 4th line group is stabilo, and that's the same with each and every glider. So with that in mind, let's get to how we go about trim tuning gliders. Let's go to this scenario here. Wrong picture. Right here. Gradient was a great manufacturer in its day. And what they did, different than most manufacturers, is they showed the spec difference between each line between the rows. So what I want to clarify here is when we get a glider in for trim tuning, we can never ever get back to the original factory links. So over here is the A row on this right side of the glider, this factory spec links, the B row, factory spec links for each and every line 1 through 14 on this specific glider, the C row 1 through 14, and the stabilos over here, and the brakes over here. So those are individual lines. We'll never attain that because lines shrink. I don't care what anybody says, lines shrink. The only time that I'll have them stretch is for acro pilots, and those get towed up quite a lot. We'll have A and B rows on the inner side will stretch a little bit. But for the most part, they eventually all shrink. But for the most part, lines just shrink. And so we can never attain the factory spec length. So what do? We do what's called a relative trim when we trim two gliders. And so what we're doing is there's a spec difference between each and every line. So if you look here, A1 and B1, gradient, which this was great about it, they put the spec difference between A1 and B1. It was 41 millimeter specs. See the green numbers here in this column and the green numbers here in this column. So this A row here, this is the spec difference between the B row. So from A1 and B1, the spec difference is 41 millimeters. From A2 to B2 is 45 millimeters. From A3 to B3 is 44 millimeters spec difference. And A4 to B4 is 43 millimeter spec difference. And then if you go over here, this is the C row compared to the B's don't have the spec column because everything's compared to the B row. C1 and B1 is 75 millimeters. C2 and B2 is 76 millimeters. And C3 and B3 is 79 millimeters. And so on and so forth. And that's the spec differences. And that's what we're attaining. We're trying to get back to that balance between each and every line as it was when it was factory spec numbers. And being we're not at factory spec numbers, but we're shrunken state, we try to get back to these spec numbers, the differences between the lines between the rows. And that's what matters most. It's not the line length, it's the spec differences. That's what trim tuning's all about. Getting that balance between the lines and the rows and their differences between each of the lines and the rows. Now, when we make adjustments on a glider, we do them with the malleon loops. The malleon loops have 3 main lines for the A row, 3 main lines for the B row, and they're grouped accordingly. So there's 4 lines in this glider at the canopy for line group 1, and 4 more lines for line group 2, and then 6 lines for line group 3. And so what we'll do is we'll get the average of those. So an example of that right here. So this is a glider here where we got, it's line, and every glider is going to have line groups different at the canopy. So this one's 444, and when that gradient one was 446, and some will be 684. It's just all varies. But in any case, you still do the same thing. You compare the line variances from spec for each of these lines from this line group A1 has these 4 lines grouped together, and I'll get the variance of each and every one of these 4 lines and the average them. What's the average variance? And then I'll compare that line group A1 with B1. What's its line group variance? And then I'll compare C1 with B1. And what's its line group variance between these groups, okay? And you'll do that for A2 in comparison to B2. Okay, here's B2's groups and A2 groups. Of course, they're right below each other for each half of the glider, but this is how they labeled them. So it'd basically be A2 here, and then B2s would be right there, but this is their labeling. And then C2s here, those averages would be compared to B2, which is the labelings here, but it'd actually be physically located right there. And same thing with A3s compared to B3, which is actually right below it. And then C3, which is right here, these numbers right there, is compared to B3. And then D3, if it exists, would be compared to B3 as well. And that's what we do. And it looks on a chart like, where can I get you a chart? Right like this. So the charts, whether it's the malleon loops or the chart data table, the averaging the line groups, it'll look like this. And so now this one's not populated to a real deal. So let's find one that's populated to a real deal. Well, anyhow, but here's the malleon loops for each line group. 1 is the yellows, the blues, the line group 2 is see the A, the B, the C, the D for the right side of the glider, left side of the glider, A, B, C, and D, and line groups 1, 2, and 3. And we're comparing line groups 1 with each other, line groups 2 with each other, line groups 3 with each other, and line groups 4 is just the stabilos. There's nothing to compare amongst each other. And so what we do different here is, if you look at this, the line groups are, some of these gliders like get up to 8 to 16 lines in a line group. Sometimes they'll combine line group and line group 1 and 2 on the C row. And sometimes they'll combine it on the B row as well. And so you'll have 16 lines instead of 8 and 8, or 4 and 4. And, it just gets really, convoluted in the sense that if you're averaging these groups, they may look hunky-dory, when in reality they're not. And let me show an example of what I mean by that. If we go to this glider here, here we go. One's populated right. Oops. It's got each of the line groups, and what populates in red is when it's beyond plus or minus 4 millimeters. When I compare line group 1 here on the right side, A1 is 12.8, and B1 is 1.8. Well, that's way beyond plus or minus 4 millimeters, so I have to make some adjustments on the A row to bring it down to be closer to B row. And then the C row and the B row are actually within plus or minus 4 millimeters, so we're good. And then we compare that accordingly. But the first thing is to zero out the B row, so we don't want no plus 11s. But the plus 1.2, the 1.8, and the 0 is fine. But this B2 line group's got to be double looped down because it's too high, and get that one closer to 0. And then we'll compare the rows and get them in balance with each other. But this is how we do it when we're grouping it in accordance with the main lines and how they're grouped at the canopy, like I was showing in the diagram. These line groups, or these 4 lines connected to the main line compared to these 4 lines in the B row that are, and these grouped together with the main line in the C row compared with the B row. But that's not how we do it here. Let me show you the way we do it here. It takes more time, it takes twice as long, sometimes even longer. But to me, it's the only way to do it. and I group them in midline groups. So instead of A1, A2, and A3, meaning the A1 meaning the inner line group closest to the center line, and A2, which is the center of the half of the wing, and then A3, which is the outside line group near the wingtip, and then the stibials on the outside. I compare them, split them in half. So midline groups now. Instead of 4, 4, 6, I'm going 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, comparing them that way. So let me show you. I'll do this midline group 2.1 with B line group 3.1, or excuse me, 2.1, and with C line 2.1. So I'm comparing these two for A's with these two on the B. Of course, it's right below it. It's just the labeling's on this side. And then these two here on C compared with these two on the B, which are right above it. And the same thing with these two here on the A row. This half of this line group is compared to the next half, which is actually right below it. And then these two on the C row compared to the B row right above it. And I do that all the way across the line. I compare the midline groups. And then let me show you why. Okay, so if you look at this chart, this is the results of each of the two line groups. So if you look up here, I got the Roman numeral 1, which is the main line group, which is broke down into two midline groups where I split them. And then line group 2 for the main lines, Roman numeral 2 is split in half. So it's got 3 and 4 for the midline groups. And then the third line group, which is the outside line group on this left side here, it's got 3 because it's 6 lines, 2, 2, 2. Are broken up that way, and the same thing on this side. So let me show you what happens here. So you look at these two lines here, the average is 3, and the line average on these two is 9. Well, if I was to group these like they were at the riser, the average here would be 6. And then if you compare with A1, it's 9 and 8, so the average between those two would be 8.5, so it would be 8.5 compared to 6. Well, guess what? That's passing. Looks good. It's not. Half this line group, you look, it's 9 here and it's 3 there. It's not passing. This side is 8 and 9. That's passing, but this 9 and 3 is not. So that's what the delusion is. There are the hidden errors when you group them according to the risers, the main lines at the risers. The line groups are too large, and they won't show you the true picture, what's going on that's hidden. And that's what I'm revealing here. I'm revealing the hidden errors, the hidden problems when I break them down to midline groups. It takes me twice as long to trim, tune, and glider, but it's not about time. It's about what I think, doing it right. And so this glider here, when it's all said and done, I mean, this is what it looked like before. The angle of attack was plus 24 millimeters. Anything above plus 10 is just unsafe to fly. You shouldn't even fly in the glider. It's so inclined to spin or stall more so than ever before that it's just not safe to fly. And this was plus 24 in this glider. I mean, look at the difference between the C row and the A row. And then looking at this is the profile of the glider. And then when we got done trim tuning, look at it, it's almost horizontal. This is the way you want it, okay? And so all the red here showing the discrepancies between the rows, between the two line groups, the midline groups were greater than 4 millimeters. They were actually up to like 18, 20 millimeters difference between the line groups, which is horrendously out of pitch balance. And then here we got everything plus or minus 4 millimeters, easy. In fact, I end up getting it, the all here showing me what it is, plus or minus 3.1 millimeters is what I end up attaining in this glider. My goal is 4 though, but if I can get more or less, I mean, less tolerance, I'll do that because it's better. And so that's what's happening here. No more red. And this is what I had to do it. I had to do these mallet loops. This is what the mallet loops were before for each of the line groups, main line groups, and this is what they were after. But of course, I can't document when I'm doing adjustments midline wise. I can't document that way with just the riser mallet. So let me show you how I do that. So this A1 on this right side was the DL. See where my cursor is, just above the top of my plus sign there. It was the DL. Where over here on line group A1 on the right side I changed it to triple loop. So I highlight that in green because it was a change. And this one was an anchor stitch plus, and I changed it to a pile hitch plus. And this one was a double loop before retrim, then after was an anchor stitch, and that was to get rid of all this red. Okay, and then some of them I had to do half the line group. So over here on the left side, I got anchor stitch plus, which was originally was an anchor stitch, so I made anchor stitch plus. But the other one was line group 2 on the left was an anchor stitch plus, and I made it, kept it that way. But other half of the group, I had to go to line segment 2.4 and -3. How do you do that? I put a line cord insert inside the line, a midline, for just that line midline group, which feeds 2 lines of the canopy in this specific case, and that would got rid of the red. And then I did the same over here on B1. It was a double loop, and I made it an anchor stitch plus, but it wasn't quite enough because half the line group was still off. So I went to line segment 2.2 and -3 millimeters by putting a line cord insert. In this case over here, I had it was a double loop, and I let it out to single loop because the line was too short, but it wasn't quite. But half the line group was right, but the other half was too long. So on line segment 2.6, I had to put a double loop in at the line-to-line connection for the midline line groups. And so that's the case over here as well. And then on the stabilos here, I had to put a new line on this side because it was just too dang short. It was like -30 millimeters. So I put a new line and extended it accordingly. And this over here, I did a pre-tension because it wasn't that far off. Put it 15 kilograms for about 15 seconds, let it sit overnight, and remeasure it, and it held. And you can do pre-tensioning for the outside line groups or the C row, just not the inner A and B's at all, because within a week they'll go back to what the original shrunken state was. But the outside line groups will hold, and so the pre-tensioning at 15 kilograms will suffice. And you just wait a night and remeasure it to get the true measurement. Because if I measured it right after I'd pre-tension, it wouldn't stay that way. What else can I tell you what we do here? That's pretty much the gist of it. But if you look here, the angle of attack was up to +25 here, which is bad. I mean, we got +20, +19, +14, anything above +18, +23. That angle of attack between the A and C was just. And then over here, look what we got now. -3 to +2.5 to +3.5. I mean, we're just sweet. And the differences between each and every line group here, between the A row and the B row and the C row, but each and every line group, comparing them vertically here, is no more than ±3.1. My goal is 4.0, and that's what we do here. Wanted to share it, and hope you can keep that in mind. If you don't see them breaking it down to midline groups, you can be rest assured they're not doing it as sweet as it can be done. Have a good day. Fly safe out there. Get your gliders tuned every 50 hours. Why fly it for 100 when that means that last 150 you're flying an untrimmed glider? It doesn't make any sense. Okay, take care.